Hi, this is Samia from Henna Fixation with your dose of Henna Fix, and today we are learning how to fix that troublesome paste. Before we get into the topic, I do want to make it very clear that I'm going to be talking about making henna paste using natural henna powder and natural ingredients. There are a handful of problems that can go wrong when you are making your henna paste. But before I get into the specific things that can happen, I want to address the broader issues that everyone should take into consideration before you start diagnosing the issues you're having with the paste. The first thing you want to consider the exact powder you're using, where in the world is it coming from, and what crop year it is. The properties of the henna powder differ significantly from one area to the next. I'm not going to go into detail too much about which region has exactly what properties, but researching a little bit of that powder is going to give you a better understanding of what kind of paste you can expect to get. So for instance, let's say that you have a Moroccan powder in your hand. The Moroccan powder tends to have a very stringy consistency when you make it into a paste. However, your preference is actually towards a creamy henna. If you're going to be using a powder that leads to a different consistency than it is your preference, no matter what you do, you are most likely going to have issues with that paste. So you want to look at the powder you're using and if it is really your preference. If you're making the paste for the first time, then you might want to experiment with different powders in different regions. Experimenting in those different areas will let you know exactly the kind of powder that you prefer and the kind of consistency that you like to do with your own designs. Not only the region, you do have to consider the crop year. You might be getting henna, for instance, let's say from India for the year 2015. You got the henna powder and you fell in love with it. It was perfect. And that supplier that you were getting from is now getting a newer batch that was just harvested in 2016. That actually might have a slightly or a significantly different consistency than the one from last year. I have an issue with saying the word consistency. I mess it up a lot of the times, so I apologize in advance if you're like, what is she saying? So go back to your powder, research where it's coming from, and research the crop year, and that will help you figure out what might be the problems or what might actually be the normal behavior for that powder. The second thing you have to consider is your personal environment where you're mixing your henna powder. Your environment is going to determine the amount of sugar and the liquid that you have to put in. Because the environment differs so drastically throughout the world, there's really not one recipe that will work for everybody. So a henna artist cannot give you this one recipe that's going to work for your region. You do have to practice and experiment a little bit. So if you are either making the henna paste for the first time, or if you have moved recently and you can't figure out what is going on with your paste, the environment is playing a huge factor. Make a little bit of the paste that you're used to, a very small amount, play around with it and see how you can adjust some of the issues. And let's talk about some of those issues now. Here are some of the problems you might experience with your paste. The first one being that it is too runny. By this, I mean that as soon as the henna is coming out of the henna cone, it just spreads. It's just running around everywhere. You can't have any control over it. And most probably it's because you've put too much liquid in there. But that is nothing to despair about. If you have made the henna paste and it is too runny, again, meaning that it's just coming out rapidly and you can't really make any shape out of it, it has too much liquid, you can just add a little bit more of the henna powder. Add a little bit at a time, mix it, and try to get it to the right consistency. Another issue related to this is that the henna paste is actually bleeding into each other. So you're making a really detailed design and you can't really tell one element from the next because it just ends up being a blob. It might not actually be that the paste is too runny, but that it has too much sugar into it. And that's where the environment is coming into play again. If it has too much sugar in relation to your environment, it is going to bleed. Each line is going to stretch out and meet each other. In that case, you might actually have to make another batch and mix this batch with it. It sounds a little bit tedious, but once you have too much sugar in the paste, it becomes a little bit difficult to control it. You could try to add a little bit of the powder and see where it takes you. However, if there's just too much sugar, you might have to mix it into another batch. Now let's talk about something that's on the other spectrum. So the henna paste is actually too dry. You have put it in the cone and you're squeezing it. It takes too much effort. And it's actually causing a fatigue on your hand, and that is not normal. How I like to do with my henna paste is as soon as I press it just a little bit, it should come out. It should be effortless. So if it is causing issues on your hand and your hand is actually hurting, you might want to thin out the paste. Add the liquid of your choice. Add a little bit more to it, a little bit at a time, and see how much it takes you. But there could be actually another problem, and that problem could be that the way that you're rolling your cone is not 100% there yet. The cone from the inside might be uncoiling, or some other issues might be going on with that. So you might have to get that cone rolling game on point. Otherwise, thin out that paste and it should be pretty good to go. Let's talk about the weird paste that actually is spreading on your skin. So it is runny, but it has a little bit of a halo around it. What I mean by that is that you have a blob of henna that has kind of bled in together, and right around it there's like a little hint of the henna around. It's like somebody took a paintbrush just a little bit and just spread it all around. It might be because you have added too much essential oils into the henna. The solution for that is that you might actually have to make another batch and then mix this one in it. You can't really offset the amount of the essential oils in a paste. You really have to make more of the batch without any essential oils and just mix this one with it. Another issue you might be having is that the henna paste is not sticking well on your skin. It just falls right off after a few minutes as you've applied it. And the reason is that it is severely lacking in sugar. You're gonna have to add more sugar in there. And actually in the end, that amount of sugar might still not be enough because you might be really in a desert hot environment, which is where I am. So you might actually have to apply some sealant on top of it as well, and the sealant is going to have sugar into it, and that is going to compensate that lack of sugar, so that paste is going to stick on your skin better. Again, if it is too dry, it is flaking off way too easily, add more sugar in that paste and that should solve that problem right away. And lastly, one of the most frustrating things that can happen is everything else is fine, but that the henna is not staining properly. So assuming that you followed the proper aftercare like I mentioned in the previous videos, you will actually have to diagnose the paste here. There might be some other things that are wrong. You have to look at the quality of the ingredients you're using. Is the henna powder you're using authentic? If it is sourced from a reputable supplier, it should be, but if it's not, then it might be actually mixed with other ingredients like sand and some other things that they add on to it to make the quantities larger. In that case, you're not gonna get a good henna stain. Or the henna powder might actually not have been stored properly. You do have to take care of how you store it because it will get old. And if that's the case, then there's nothing really you can do. So diagnose the paste by looking at the ingredients, knowing where they are coming from, because the only way the natural henna is not going to stain is because there is some sort of a quality issue here. Not only does it depend on storing of the henna powder, but also storing of the henna cone. The henna cone you're using, is it completely made fresh, or has it been sitting out on the counter for too long, or has it been sitting out in the fridge for too long? If you would like to get more information about how to store your henna cones and your henna powder, please like and comment below. I would definitely make a video about that for you guys. So again, whether you're making henna for the first time or whether you are making it in a different environment, I recommend making smaller batches so you can really get down and diagnose the paste without wasting too much of the ingredients. Thank you very much for watching. If there's some things that I did not discuss in that video and you would like to know the answer to them, then please comment below and I can definitely make a follow-up another time. Until next time, henna on.